Hi everyone, this is Wendy and Nick, and they have just walked the Camino Portugues, which you did you ended at you finished about a week ago or 10 days ago or something like that, right?
Yeah, a little bit longer, maybe 2 weeks ago now.
Oh, is it 2 weeks ago? Yeah, because we're going to meet up in person, but we couldn't figure out a good time, and then of course you had to go back home, and so we decided to do it on Skype instead of doing it in person. And actually, I had another video interview in person scheduled for yesterday with someone else in Santiago. But of course, now in Santiago, you're not allowed to meet. You're not allowed to meet up with anyone else than the people that are in your family, because
Right.
the virus situation is such that it's complicated.
Yeah, we were just talking yesterday about how we think we were really lucky to fit it in when we did, because basically as soon as we came home, both in Spain and Portugal, the situation has gotten a lot worse, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, before we talk about your walk, I've been looking at your photos, Nick. Are you a photographer? 'Cause you have some beautiful photos.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
Yeah.
No, it's a hobby. I really enjoy it, but I'm not a professional.
Oh,
I
okay. Yeah. Because I'm going to link to you have a Flickr page. There's a beautiful photo, so I'm going to link to it in the description. So, do you do anything related to the Camino? Do you have a business or run?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm hoping to start a web project, but it's just at this stage a personal thing, but just to start creating content and more photos and things like that.
Okay. Anything that you want to tell us about, or is it too early yet?
Well, it's not launched yet.
Okay.
It's going to be called Spirit of the Camino, and it's going to be we're going to have a podcast and
That's nice.
photos and articles and just general content all about the Camino, just celebrating the Camino, basically.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about your walk, because of course now we're in the COVID. Now things are worse, at least in Spain. I think in Portugal things are looking a bit grimmer too. How was it when you walked? How did you find the COVID situation kind of affected your walk? Were you able to enjoy the Camino even though had this COVID situation going on?
Yeah, I'd say definitely we were able to enjoy it. Obviously, things were different than they have been on our previous Caminos, but we actually live in Lisbon, and so we were used to, the regulations that are in place in Portugal. Those have been in place for several months now already, in terms of being required to wear a mask in all indoor public spaces. In Spain, it's also required to wear them in outdoor public spaces, so that was a little bit different. That took a bit of getting used to, and we weren't sure how that was going to work with, walking and wearing a mask the whole time while you're walking, if you really have to do that. So yeah, obviously we had to adjust to some things, and there were far fewer pilgrims than there normally would be. But we did get a few occasions to meet some other pilgrims and to share a couple of communal dinners with them. And we did feel the spirit of the Camino in certain places, which was really special. And because it wasn't happening all the time, it made it all that more special on those occasions when we did have those moments.
Yeah. Did you find you had to work? Did you wear a mask all the time? You didn't? I don't think people usually wear a mask when they're out in the middle of nowhere,
No.
Yeah.
No, not when you're in those rural areas. I mean, what we did notice, which we thought was quite interesting, is that once you crossed into Spain, even in rural areas in Spain, people weren't wearing masks. For example, if you were on a trail and someone would be walking their dog, maybe a local person, or just doing some exercise, but if they were coming towards you, they would have their mask ready and they would put it on.
Yes.
They crossed you, and so then we would put ours on, and then we would cross each other, and then we would take it off.
Yes.
So no, I mean, I think some people were scared, or because of the regulations, the way that they're actually written, it does make it sound like in Spain you have to have it at all times.
Yes.
And I think we met someone who said she chose the Portuguese Camino because she didn't want to wear a mask all the time, basically.
Oh, yeah. No, I think the rules say you have to wear it in all public places, I think it is. But we live outside of Santiago, maybe half an hour drive outside, and when I go for a walk here in the forest, I can go walk maybe half an hour and maybe meet one person, or probably none. So I'll bring a mask, but I won't wear it. Yeah. So
yeah, I think it's common sense. If you're not near anybody else, you don't need to be wearing.
Yeah. So where did you start the Camino? Did you start all the way from Lisbon?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And so in a way, I mean, when you mentioned that there were a lot fewer pilgrims than usual, but from Lisbon to Porto, there aren't usually that many to begin with.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there still were less, but, that's a pretty solitary kind of route anyway, at least that first section. So that part of it maybe wasn't that affected. The real problem we had in that section from Lisbon to Porto was that that all the municipal albergues are closed in Portugal.
Yeah.
And in that first stretch, that's often the only option in a given town in terms of albergues. Once you get past Porto, and especially once you get past Tui, there's albergues everywhere. So even if the municipal ones are closed or the Xunta ones are closed in Galicia, you have other options. But in that initial stretch in Portugal, before you get to Porto, you don't really have many private options at all.
Did that create problems? I mean, did you have to plan ahead then, or bus or taxi back and forth, or were you able to figure it out?
Yeah, we never took a bus or a taxi. That's kind of a personal rule of ours, is that we just don't take any transport when we're on Camino. We did do the Variante Espiritual, so that involved taking a boat. That was a bit different, but that's a special pilgrim's boat, and it's a special circumstance.
Was that running now? Did you have to book it, or how was that?
Yeah, that was also, we didn't really know what the situation was going to be, if it was going to be running or not. We were hearing conflicting information. They run it with a minimum of 5 people in terms of, they need that many people for it to be financially viable for the boat to run. Yeah. And we did have exactly 5 pilgrims the day that we took it.
That's good. Yeah.
So that worked out well. I imagine normally it's a €19 ticket per person, and I imagine if you were missing one person, then maybe the 4 of you could, get together and split the cost of a 5th ticket in order to get the boat to run. Yeah. It's purely a financial measure. Yeah. At least that was the situation, when we were there. Things are changing all the time, so
that's the thing too. Yeah, exactly. Like a week ago, it's one thing, and now it's a different thing. And they're talking in Spain now to maybe do a curfew, or some sections of Spain have different restrictions than others. So how is it in Portugal now?
Well, they've just announced something yesterday, which is just coming for a limited period because we have some holidays coming up with Halloween and All Saints Day. They're trying to restrict people from going from one concelho to another, so one kind of district to another, just for a period of about 5 days. Okay. And there are now, I believe, 3 concelhos which are near Porto but not on the Camino, which have been locked down since yesterday. Yeah. So yeah, it's changing all the time, but our daily cases are higher than they've ever been. Yeah. So yeah, it's unfortunately it is getting worse.
Yeah. Yes.
You'd have to change our plans quite a bit, or plan in advance for accommodation, especially in that early section, because basically we would just start calling whatever there was, a day ahead of us and saying, "Are you open?" And then if someone said they're open, we said, "Oh, great, we'll book with you. We're coming." But often they just said, "No, we're not open at all." Yeah. And so 3 times I think we went a little bit off Camino, not that far, but about 2 kilometers off Camino, because there was an accommodation option there, and we had nothing that was available on the Camino. So yeah, we did have to plan it a little bit. So that was a bit tricky, but it also made it fun. It meant every day we didn't really know what was happening the next day. So
because I talked to some people that have walked the Camino Frances and in the last few months, and they were saying, some of them, they were saying that some have booked ahead and some people were just walking into town and then see what was there. But I guess it's different, especially when you're all the way south around Lisbon, or between Lisbon and Porto. There's so few places to begin with, so you have to kind of plan it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you find any other pilgrims walking with you, or were you alone all the way to Porto?
Yeah, we were counting, actually. I think we came across 16 pilgrims in 20 days, so less than per day, and almost all of them we only saw one time. And there was this one guy who we walked with for about 3 days. We had about the same stages, and that was it.
Yeah.
He went. I think he took some transport to get a little bit ahead, and then we never saw him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, you kind of see someone in the distance, and you think, "Oh my God, there's a pilgrim," and then they go ahead of you, or you go ahead of them, and then that's it.
Yeah. And then it changed in Porto. It changed then, or did it not? Or how was that?
Changed.
Yeah.
It's still not anywhere near what it would be in a normal non-COVID situation. So yeah, even then, we had on the Variante Espiritual, one of the days we had the albergue completely to ourselves. In Padron, we thought we were going to have the albergue completely to ourselves, and then a cyclist showed up towards the end of the day.
Okay.
So, and some other times that we were staying with, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 other people. So, by normal standards, it was still very, very quiet, but more pilgrims obviously than the first stretch to Porto.
How did you walked you've walked the Camino before? I think you've walked some other ones, right? Earlier, so you have something to compare with. That's what I'm getting at. Like, how was it walking now under these restrictions with the COVID and everything, compared to before? How was the albergues or the accommodation where you slept in? Did they have? I'm sure they had some kind of measures. And how did you find that?
Yeah, in terms of the albergues, there were restrictions. Most albergues are at half capacity or some kind of reduced capacity, which can be a good thing because it means you don't have to be on the top bunk, right?
That's right.
And so usually, basically, the top bunks are wiped out. But it also just means that it just feels kind of empty. You don't have that. There's something exciting about a full albergue room when everybody's coming in and they're telling their stories from the day, and that's where you meet a lot of people, often.
Yeah.
The other thing was that the kitchens were almost all closed. And so that, and that's also for social distancing, and we understand it completely, but it meant that you didn't have that gathering point or that, social place where you can, cook and eat with other pilgrims and things like that. So that was out.
Yeah.
Which is something to keep in mind, because it is going to increase your budget. If you're used to cooking for yourself a lot of the time, that's probably not going to be an option. Or if you have specific dietary requirements. We're vegan, for example, and we don't really cook that much on the Camino anyway. We managed to find food out at restaurants, but it did mean that we had to do that. We didn't have the option of going to a supermarket and cooking something.
Yeah. Also, since I guess it sounded like you were also doing more private lodging than probably maybe a normal Camino would be, that would also increase the budget.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And it was quite interesting in Portugal. The prices varied quite a lot. We sort of paid. I think the cheapest we paid was probably 25 to 30 euros for a room. This is outside of albergue prices, and then up to like 55. I think, or we might have even paid more than that, 55, 60 one time. So it just seemed random depending on the town.
Yeah.
One day you pay 30 and the next day you might pay 50 and you thought, okay, it's more or less a similar place.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of the way it is.
So you sounded like you called ahead then, right? You didn't use booking.com or anything like that, did you?
We did sometimes. It just depended. We just kind of looked at, for example, Gronce and saw what was the accommodation, what were the possibilities the next day, within a reasonable walking day. We basically picked what we thought was our number one choice, called that, and then, went down the list from there.
Yeah.
But then if they were available on Booking, we used Booking sometimes. But we often just found that calling in this situation it just meant you got the latest information.
Exactly. Yeah. So how did it change when you walked into Spain? Did you feel any difference in the way pilgrims were treated in albergues or in hotels or places like that? Was it the same or any different?
What do you think?
I don't feel like there was a big difference in how pilgrims were treated. No, I think we still felt pretty welcome there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difference, as Wendy alluded to before, was that wearing masks in public spaces outdoors is not mandatory in Portugal. And I think they're doing it in Parliament today, so it might become mandatory. But like as soon as you cross from Valença to Tui, you notice that, because I would guess that maybe 50% of people are doing it in Portugal, and so they get to 100%. And that was it was just interesting, and it was interesting because after a week or so in Spain, when we came back to Lisbon, suddenly we were a bit unnerved that we saw all these people walking outside in the city without masks.
That's
you
right.
Get used to it,
Yes, I am totally used to it now. I've been doing it for months. It's just normal. You bring your car keys, your wallet, your mask, and you go. You know, that's what it is.
And we've been doing it in Lisbon anyway. You know, I mean, we wear our masks all the time outdoors in Lisbon anyway, but it's just sort of seeing all the other people doing it as opposed to seeing half the people do it was a little bit of a change.
Yeah.
And then the difference was that the sanitizer, it really seems like mandatory in shops in Spain, and it's less so in Portugal. So like when you're in Santiago, if you're doing, you know, if you're just looking in some of the souvenir shops, you know, you go into a shop and you have to sanitize, and then you look around for a minute, then you go into the next shop and you've got to do it again. And so
exactly. So if you stop in by a lot of shops in Santiago, you have to like put like 10 times in like 10 minutes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And one other impact in terms of the regulations in the albergues was that we brought sleeping bags with us for the first time. Normally we don't. We just bring like a sleep sack because it's much smaller and lighter and easier to carry. And we try to keep our packing pretty minimalist and take quite small bags. But we had heard that the albergues weren't supplying blankets anymore. And we thought, okay, well, we might need to bring sleeping bags in that case. So we did, and we did use them. We did need them a few times. So I would recommend that. We also brought inflatable pillows because that was another thing that we had read, that albergues weren't providing pillows. And in our experience, that was not true. We basically always were given a pillow. So, I mean, it wasn't an inordinate amount of regulations. You know, a lot of the things that we had read that sounded really intimidating turned out not to be true, about how you have to wear gloves all the time and you have to, I don't know, constantly be wiping everything down and sanitizing everything you touch. And it wasn't anything that was unreasonable, I didn't think.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like the COVID kind of took away from the Camino, from the experience, from the walk that much, really, except from being less pilgrim, you know.
But no, I still think it was still a Camino, and we still had these great moments like you have on all Caminos. You know, I mean, there were just less camaraderie with other pilgrims. But, you know, as you mentioned before, we've done some other Caminos, and last year we walked the Camino de Madrid, and there was nobody on that.
That's true.
And so we actually saw more people on this during COVID than we did last year, pre-COVID, on the Camino de Madrid. So, you know, we've done at least one route before where there weren't many pilgrims, so we knew what to expect in that regard.
Yeah, and we were just really grateful to be out there exploring the world in some fashion. You know, normally we travel a lot, and all of our travel was canceled for this year, and the Camino was the one thing that we decided we were comfortable enough doing, you know, given that we live in Lisbon, so we didn't have to, you know, fly internationally to arrive at the location or anything. We literally just walked out our door, which really appealed to me. I've always wanted to do that, so it was a good excuse to do it this year. And in some ways it felt like a safer form of travel than other things that we could have done instead that we weren't so comfortable with, because you know, you are out in rural areas most of the time, and in our case we didn't have to travel except to come back from Santiago to Lisbon. We took a train, so we were just grateful that we were able to do it.
And then you arrived in Santiago, and how was that experience? The pilgrim's office, I'm sure there wasn't much of a line, was there? No.
We were literally straight in. I think we also went in the morning after we got there, which is, I think, usually a good time to go anyway. No, there wasn't a line at all. No, I mean, we've heard that just in the last couple of days you can't do indoor dining in Santiago anymore.
No, as of yesterday morning, you can't meet anyone outside of your own family, and you can't dine inside, and the cafes are all closed inside now. So there's only tables outside.
And the thing is, you know, normally, like in Lisbon, we eat outside anyway when we can because the weather is usually good. In Santiago, where it rains every day.
That's why I was in Santiago today, and most of the cafes are closed because it's raining today, and there's no tables outside. No one's going to sit outside. But I agree with you. My wife and I have had lunch at the Plaza Quintana, the square behind the cathedral, a couple of times in the last few weeks, because if it's sunny, it's a nice place to sit down and have lunch outside. But I
was just thinking when I read this about closing the indoor eating that, you know, because we stayed in Santiago for 3 nights, I think, and we probably ate indoors almost every meal. if I just think back on it. So
Yeah.
just because you never knew it was going to rain or it was already raining or whatnot. So yeah, that would have had a big impact. But I always enjoy going to Santiago. You know, I think it's a great place. You know, we always see new things or different things, and you know, I think if you make such an effort to get there, you should spend some time, you know, looking around and appreciating it as well. So
did you go inside the cathedral? Did you see? Yeah, they are still working on it, but it looks, doesn't it look nice?
Yeah, it's getting there. We've never seen it without scaffolding on the cathedral.
Oh, no.
Every time that we've been all the way to Santiago. But it's getting less and less every year.
Yeah.
Also on the outside as well. I think this was the most that we ever saw of the facade. There is still some scaffolding around the bottom, but you can see the two big towers and everything. So, yeah, it's really beautiful. The inside is still a bit of a mess.
Yes.
You can't see the statue of Santiago, the one that people normally hug. I don't know if that will be a thing anymore anyway, even once the scaffolding comes off.
Yeah.
But we were able to go down to the crypt and see his relics, like without waiting in line at all. So that was nice.
That's good.
Yeah, that was actually really nice because the first time we did that, you know, there's just so many people, and it's like when you go to see, you know, Mao when you're in Beijing, you know, you just get kind of shuffled along and you barely get a chance to kind of enjoy it. But this time you could really take that in and enjoy that.
That's great. You mentioned that you took the train back to Lisbon. How was the experience with the train? Did you feel comfortable in the train with people wearing masks and?
We'd taken a couple of months ago. We took a train from Lisbon to Braga and back, and at that time, Comboios Portugal, the rail system in Portugal, was only doing 50% capacity, so it was very evidently half full or less than half full. And then this way coming back from Santiago, it was more full than that. Right? Yeah. We had to take 3 different trains to get to Vigo, and then to Porto, and then to Lisbon.
And we had to leave at like 6 o'clock in the morning because there was only one train.
Unrelated, I guess, to COVID, unless they've taken the afternoon train off.
Yeah, I feel like there were fewer options, both with the train and the bus. I think they just have fewer running in general. So it is probably a good idea to look into that a few days in advance and book something. I mean, in the end, you know, we probably could have gotten a ticket on the same day. We got it the day before. But I think there are fewer transport options.
That's actually a separate question, because I remember a while back you were saying you changed trains in Vigo, but wasn't there talk about having a direct train? Was that something that?
Brilliant.
Someone
even chip that.
So I have seen talk about that, but I don't think it's ready yet.
Oh, it's not ready yet. Yeah.
No, I'm not sure if it's really that close to being ready either.
Yeah.
But they're about it.
The previous options used to be this really early train. I think it leaves at 6:17 or so from Santiago. Or you could take an afternoon train, but you couldn't get all the way to Lisbon in one day. You'd have to stay overnight in Porto. So we did that once. And this was the first time we took that really early train. But, you know, when you're, being in Spain's a little bit of a different story because your time zone is wrong. But,
yes, you're right.
Getting up anyway when we're walking, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. Well, any other story that you wanted to tell from your walk this time? Something that happened to you that you kind of felt was nice, or something, some experience?
What? I don't know where to start. One thing that we thought was really interesting was that, you know, as we've been mentioning, these albergues, they're always half full, or that's the maximum. They're less than half full, and you just have this feeling, you know, something's kind of up. And we had this German pilgrim said to us once, we were in the same room with him, and he said, does it feel different to you this year? And we kind of said, yeah, it's really quite a lot different. You know? And he said, oh, good. It's not just me then. It's okay. And he seemed relieved that we also agreed that it was different. But the point of the story is, firstly, that was just a little bit unusual. But when we went to Casa da Fernanda, in between Barcelos and Ponte de Lima, she was full.
That was the only albergue that we stayed in that was anywhere close to being full. I mean, she had taken out a couple of beds. Normally, I believe she had 10 beds in the room, but they're not bunk beds. So that meant that she was able to keep more of them, I guess, because it's harder, you know, when you have bunk beds with 2 on top of each other, then even if you take out the lower bunk, you still have people close together. So she just took out 2, and then there were 8, and then there's a 9th spot for someone who sleeps outside on a covered terrace. I never saw that. I wasn't sure exactly where that was. But yeah, sorry I interrupted.
But it was full. So we had 9 people, and that was just the complete normal experience there. Wow. We saw more pilgrims there in that house than virtually the whole rest.
I think that place is such a popular place. Everyone that walk, even now, they just make a point of staying there.
Yeah,
exactly. So I mean, she seemed basically unaffected, by the whole thing. She was just running, basically as per normal. And so, yeah, it's quite fascinating. We talked to her about when she very first bought the place. She didn't know it was on the Camino, and then somebody basically came in and asked for shelter one day, I think, and then she thought, "Who's this? What's this all about?" And then eventually she started, this really successful albergue from
That's nice.
And so she's going strong. So that was really nice to see as well.
That was great.
And thing that was interesting when we were staying there was that most of the pilgrims who we met there were walking in the opposite direction. They were walking towards Lisbon. And it was because they had chosen not to cross into Spain, whether it was for quarantine reasons. At one point, if you're coming from the UK, for example, when you go back to the UK, you would have to quarantine if you had been in Spain, but not if you had only been in Portugal, or for insurance purposes and things like that. For some people, it made more sense to come to Portugal, but not to go to Spain. So people were starting in Lisbon, or, I guess that you could also do it just starting from Porto as well, and going up the coastal route as far as the border to Valença, and then coming down the central route. And making a loop tour like that, which does actually work well on the Portuguese Camino because you have the Fatima arrows.
Yep.
So normally you would, on any other Camino, you would be walking against the signage and it might be difficult to find your way. But because you have the blue arrows that are pointing the way to Fatima, which is basically just the opposite direction on the same Camino, it means that you can actually do that loop. And so we had never thought of it, but
That's
it was
a good
what
idea.
a lot of doing.
Yeah, and so we got to Casa de Fernando and we saw all these people and we're like, where are you guys all come? Like, how come we haven't been seeing you? Because they're coming from the other direction.
Oh, yeah. That's true. That's true. Because the blue arrows goes out of Santiago all the way down to Fatima.
Yeah, we were surprised actually because, when you start from Lisbon, for the first few days, it's the same. So you have the yellow and the blue arrows going in the same direction, and then at a certain point the routes diverge, and then later on they rejoin, but in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
But we thought from Porto, or even certainly once we got to the border, we would stop seeing the blue arrows. But yeah, you're right. We kept seeing them all the way to Santiago.
Yeah, that's great.
But I don't suppose many people start in Santiago and walk to Fatima that way.
Some people, not now maybe, but other years, I know people walk the Frances and then they continue from Santiago down. They just continue walking the blue arrows. Yeah, so.
They just don't want to stop.
Exactly, there are those people. So what, do you have plans for another one, or are you just staying put for now? Or it seems like you travel a lot, and then you can't. So now you can't travel, but you can walk.
Yeah, definitely. So for this winter, I think we'll just stay here. But yeah, hopefully in the spring we can do Caminos again. You just never know what the situation. But now having done this one which made sense for the reasons that Wendy said before, so now we know what it's like, and we can easily take a bus or something to Seville, for example, and start the Via de la Plata, and that that's really easy. So we can do things without flying again.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're hoping to do maybe one of the southern Caminos next spring, but we'll just have to see what the
Very
situation's
good.
like.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and good luck with your project.
All right, thank you very much, and we'll let you know on the forums at least.
Yes, please post it. Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Ciao.